Is Polaris in trouble? The Razor gets HVAC, Sara Price gets a factory Can-Am ride to Dakar, and we go for a night ride in Utah. This is the UTV Driver podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Zach Bowman. I am joined today by Executive Editor Aaron Richardson. Aaron, how's it going?
Dude, everything is great in Virginia. We're finally starting to get some fall weather. Leaves are coming off the trees. It's nice and crisp out. And I just got back from Utah, so I'm feeling great. I had a really good time, and just
All right,
everything's
bud.
great.
Riding season. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with the biggest news of the week. There was a little bit of shock for just about everybody. Polaris released its new earnings report, and boy, is it not great.
No.
Turns out the company said earnings are down 82% over the previous year, and if it continues that way, the company's looking at losing about 20% worth of profits compared to 2023. What is going on?
Yeah, as crazy as that is, it's not really a surprise. We've had high interest rates all year. They're starting to come down, but they're still way above where they were, like, say, during the pandemic. There's been uncertainty around the election, and a lot of people who wanted a side-by-side bought one in the last couple of years, at least since the pandemic. And so now there's like a bunch of inventory sitting at dealers. The supply chain issues are over, and so I think there's kind of an overcompensation for all of the hardship there was getting stuff in the last couple of years. So now here we sit with demand is lower and supply is high. So
here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, holy crap. I mean,
I know.
I can't remember the last time I drove by a dealer and didn't see just a fleet of side-by-sides sitting outside. And that's not just Polaris, that's just about everybody.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're seeing a sort of return to normal. It's weird to say that, like, 4 years after the official pandemic that we're still seeing some sort of normalization, but I think that very much might be the case because, like you said, if you were stuck at home and looking for ways to spend time with your family that wasn't Disney World, a side-by-side made a perfect solution for that. So you probably bought one. And the machines have gotten so good at this point that you don't need to replace it every year or every 4 years. So there's a good chance that there's a certain amount of market saturation that's happening there.
Yeah. And I also wonder if we're seeing sort of a correction in like what people are purchasing, not just whether they're buying a side-by-side or not. But, anecdotally, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, talking to my local power sports dealer that started selling Polarises this year, they're having no trouble moving Rangers. Yeah. They said they sell like 15 Rangers a month or some insane thing. So, utility rigs, at least for one small portion of the market here in Virginia, are moving. So I wonder if, we put Polaris and whoever else built a bunch of sport rigs and people are less interested in those now than they were during the last couple of years. So, I'm willing to look at this as kind of like I said, a correction rather than, if it happens again next year, then we'll really start to worry.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't blame people, right? I mean, I certainly feel like I have less dumb money sitting around than I did maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Some of that's inflation, right? Everything just seems to cost more. And at the end of the day, you've got less in the piggy bank for toys, and I don't think I'm alone in that experience. So, if you're looking at the difference between, well, I need to put a little bit of cash aside, or, man, it sure would be nice to have a new Mavar or a new Razor, that's the way you're going to go.
Yep.
What's interesting is Polaris isn't the only company running into this, right? Every major power sports manufacturer is hitting this. I saw a rash of Harley Davidson closings. Can-Am's earnings report was also not great this last quarter. We're certainly seeing a correction back from the sort of ooey gooey glory days of 2020. So I don't know. It certainly sucks for Polaris. They haven't said anything about layoffs so far. They still seem committed to cranking out a bunch of good new products, which I guess brings us along to our next story. We went rooting around in the patent office, and it looks like Polaris is getting ready to really revamp the Razor in a big way. What are they up to?
So it looks like that they have an enclosed Razor on the way. Everything that the patent drawings show is windows, doors, front and rear windshields, HVAC, and a 360-degree camera, so you can get a full panorama of what's going on around you. And It looks really cool, and I have to say, I feel like it's about time, right? Polaris has, not to say that they've been resting on their laurels, but Polaris has a bunch of machines with really excellent HVAC. You know, they're starting to bring the quality of their interiors up. We've seen it with the Expedition, we've seen it with the Ranger 1500, or XD 1500, and so now it's kind of like, well, the next step is Razor, right? And you know, it kind of goes hand in hand with, we've always said that, you know, Polaris they're really accessible machines. They're easy to drive. They're easy to get along with. Even the Monster Pro R is super easy to get along with for anybody. And so adding this extra degree of comfort and luxury, you know, it makes sense. And we don't see a ton of sports side-by-sides with enclosed cabs. It's certainly not from the factory. You know, you can do it if you want to spend a lot of money in the aftermarket, but I don't think Can-Am sells one, you know, so it's tough to get a hold of. And, you know, it goes back to correcting the losses from this year. And also, you know, you've got growing brands from across the sea, from, you know, CF Moto and stuff like that. So Polaris is definitely seeing a need to change what it's doing or update the machines that it's already making. So it makes a lot of sense.
I think what you said there is really worth pointing out, right? This isn't, at least according to these patent drawings, this isn't an accessory package.
No,
this is like a fully sealed factory rig. And, you know, obviously Polaris is taking what it's learned from machines like the Expedition and attempting to apply it here, which is exciting. You know, I think, especially if you're trying to lure in people who aren't dyed-in-the-wool riders, who aren't, you know, power sports people and maybe haven't been for the majority of their life, they're going to want those creature comforts. You know, if you're coming from a four-door Wrangler and you get into a four-door Razor and it's hot and you're dusty or you're muddy or you're wet or whatever, that's not everybody's cup of tea, right? You know, and it's a lot easier to sell to the family when you're like, yeah, just jump in and you'll be fine and comfy and all the rest of that. I think it's a really smart play.
Yeah.
And honestly, when you start to look at the sort of MSRPs the new sport rigs are commanding, yeah, why wouldn't it have HVAC? If I can if I can go down to the Toyota dealer and buy a two-door, you know, base Tacoma for $36,000 that has heat and HVAC and windows and wipers and all the rest of that stuff, why doesn't my $50,000 Razor have that stuff? You know, so
yeah, I think that's true. And I was just about to say, I think it'll be interesting to see which Razors they put this on, right? Because you know, a Pro R with an enclosed cab and HVAC is going to cost a pretty penny. But, you know, I think fewer families are interested in the 225 horsepower whoops eater than they are in like a Razor XP or a Razor Pro XP. The patent drawing appeared to show a Razor Pro platform, but I think this would really make sense on like the 100 horsepower Razor XP 4. Put HVAC and a cab on that, and then, you know, your kids aren't going to get muddy and wet and cold. You know, if you put two 10-year-olds in the back, they're going to have way less to complain about. So yeah, I think it makes a huge amount of sense. It just kind of, all that's left now is to wait and see when we see it. You know, I hope that their earnings report doesn't, you know, adjust fire. But
kibosh on
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see whether it's going to be more in, you know, because Polaris, great, right? Like we've seen basically two different flavors of enclosed cab. You get the XD 1500, which is quiet and comfortable, and, you know, it's awesome. And then you get the Expedition, which is sealed, but it sounds like you're riding along in a 55-gallon drum, right? It's just, it is so loud in there. And part of that's just because the noise from the engine and transmission doesn't have anywhere to go. So it just bounces around inside the cab. And, you know, you probably should be wearing ear protection when you're riding in that rig, which is not a thing that we typically say with side-by-sides.
Yeah.
If it's more along the XD 1500 lines, where they've sort of figured out how to get the noise out and away from the rig and the occupants, rock and roll. I am 100% all for it. If it's more along the Expedition line, oh man, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough.
I think I agree with you, but I think that it might be a little bit different in the case of the Razor, because if you look at any of the Razors, they have that little tiny bed, but where the engine sits is well back and below where people sit, even in the four-seaters. One of the issues with the Expedition is that, especially in the ADV model, sort of SUV form factor, your back passengers are sitting pretty much on top of the
On
engine.
the motor.
Yeah, it's like where the engine sits in the rig, and because everything's very upright and truck shaped, if you're going to put an engine in the middle, like Tacomas would be loud and obnoxious if they were mid-engine, right? There's just very little, like you run out of real estate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I imagine
that's a good point.
Yeah,
you know,
I imagine it'll be worse than the XD 1500 because I would imagine noise is less of a concern, but also it would be. I would be shocked if it's as cacophonous as the XPED is, and that's not to throw any shade. Well, no, that is to throw shade at the XPED, but it's still a good rig. We still love you, but
yes, but also tone it down a little bit.
Yeah. Put some Dynamat in there.
Yeah, no, that's entirely valid. And look, man, I know there are people out there rolling their eyes saying, you know, why do you need an enclosed razor? Look, I can't stress enough how much less worn out you are at the end of the day of riding in an enclosed rig. You know, you're just, the wind's not beating you to death. You're not sweating or shivering or all the rest of that. Like that may make me soft. Look, I'm happy to adopt that mantle, but man, is it nice! It's super nice.
You know, I think it's you're absolutely right, and I think one of the things that you have to, if you're asking why do you need an enclosed side by side, an enclosed sport side by side, it's not too far down the road from the question why do you need a side by side at all, right? And the answer is, for a sport rig especially, you don't. So if you're considering a sport rig, you've already jumped the shark over, like, do I need one of these, and gone to, I want one badly enough to spend the money. And at that point, it's like, well, it might as well be as comfortable as you can make it.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that for the vast majority of the country, a closed cab makes a lot of sense. Like if you're just riding in the Southwest, yeah, I get it. You know, you dust off some sand at the end of the day and you're fine, right? But out here, I mean, right now, it's 70 degrees outside, so like perfect riding weather, but it is pouring rain, which means that you and your rig, whatever clothes you're wearing, you're gonna burn at the end of the day. That's full
just
stop.
Set them on fire.
So, you know, you either accept that reality, or you're in a place where, oh, my rig is sealed and I can get out there and have a good time, and I've got windshield wipers and I can see and all the rest of that stuff. So yeah, to me, it really makes sense for a 48 state rig. It makes sense for really a 4-season rig in a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to this later, but believe me, in the Southwest, after about mid-October, it can get really cold outside.
Did you find out about that?
Like I said, more on that later. But a windshield and doors at the very least, and certainly HVAC is going to make it. You know, you can go riding on Christmas in Utah. You know, come on. What sounds more fun than that? Yeah,
let's go get a Christmas tree, throw it on top of the razor. You know. Well, that sounds awesome. I mean, I'm excited to see Polaris doing things that aren't just special editions. You know, we've seen a couple of new special edition razors roll out. There was the Pro Art Race replica, which was super cool, and they worked with what was it? Pro Armor, I think they worked with for the Armored Edition, which, you know, stickers and colors, that's all fun, but it's the same sort of thing that we see once a model starts getting long in the tooth. They throw out these new special editions to keep people interested, and it's good to see them working on something that's a little bit beyond that stuff.
Yeah, and the facelift was nice.
Sure.
You know, but again, it was kind of like, all right, it's a mid-cycle refresh. So yeah, I think you do need substantive changes. And reality is the market is moving quickly.
Yes.
You know, we jumped from nothing over 150 horsepower to 180 horsepower to 225 to 240 in the space of 4 years, less than 4 years. So we've taken this huge quantum leap in like what a side by side can do. And, you know, I wonder if that's got something to do with everybody's profits turning down a little bit. Is like, you know, suddenly you've got a rig that in car terms is brand new, but is 4 years old. And, you know, suddenly it starts to look outdated pretty quickly. So, you know, it's just hard to keep up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that happen with the automotive space, left, right, and center, right? You know, it's there aren't a whole lot of products in the world where every 2 years it gets a ground up refresh, but that's kind of what we see in the car space. If a platform is 5 years old, it's ancient, right? And side by sides, like it or not, are slowly moving in that direction where constant change and improvement is the sort of note of the day. And, you know, I think Polaris realizes that, you know, once you get out of happy fun time play money, which is like the $10,000 to $15,000 range. People want something that's not the same thing from last year with different stickers on it.
It becomes a value proposition. And
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
speaking of interesting news, how cool is this, dude? Sara Price got a factory Can-Am ride to Dakar.
I am so excited. I reference, shameless plug. We made a video about this last year. I went to Saudi Arabia. I hung out with Sara Price in the bivouac while she was getting ready for the 2024 race. And like, I can't tell you how impressive she was then. She came to sorry, I almost said Dakar. She came to Saudi Arabia for the Dakar Rally on her own dime. She paid South Racing for a customer ride, which is, there are houses that are not as expensive as that is, right?
Yeah, I think like both of our first houses were less than what
right. So, and she paid out of pocket. I mean, she had some sponsorship, but like pretty much she just pulled the money out of her wallet and said, I'm going to go. And then she was not a Can-Am factory driver. She won a stage. She became the first American woman to win a stage at Dakar. And this is
after having like all sorts of like teething troubles getting the car ready. Like,
she had to do a second shakedown day. I watched them take her car all the way apart, chasing like some sensor wiring gremlin. Her shocks were being rebuilt in the pits like the night before the prologue stage. It was sketchy, and she missed the podium by like this much because of Sara, I'm sorry, a rookie error in navigating, but it was just this incredibly impressive effort. And until like the second to last stage, it looked like, damn, she might win it, let alone get on the podium. And so then she came back and it just got quiet for a while.
Yeah.
And we're kind of going,
you gonna do the thing?
Right. And so finally last week, the Mavar comes out. South Racing gets a hold of a Mavar to build their Dakar rigs for this year. And last week or earlier this week, we got the news that Sara is going. She's going to be a Can-Am factory driver, and she's partnering with Sean Berryman as her co-driver. So she's changing co-drivers. But it's worth noting that Berryman was co-driver for Casey Curry when Curry won in 2020. So this guy's been around the block a couple times. He's got a ton of experience. Yeah. So she's going to be in what used to be T4, I guess it's called SSV now. So it's a stock wheelbase, stock width, pretty much a stock machine with a few tweaks here and there. It's got an FIA chassis that South Racing builds, but yeah, full factory effort. So she's got all that behind her. So I can't wait. It's going to be really impressive to see what she does. And you don't want to put the jinx on anybody, but I think it's going to be a pretty good year.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show. I can tell you that much. I mean, Look, I whether or not you like racing or like watching racing, Dakar is something else. It's something else entirely. These machines are just going absolutely balls to the wall across the desert that like you couldn't walk, and you literally never know what can happen because it's how long is the race? It's like a full week of racing.
Yeah,
right?
it's like it's 14 days.
2 weeks. It's
2
weeks of racing.
12 stages over 14 days. And
so, like, how many Bajas is that back to back?
12.
Oh, 12 Bajas.
Yeah.
Is that all?
Yeah. No, each stage is something like the average is a little below 1,000 kilometers. Jesus. For those of you who only speak American, 1,000 kilometers is 620 miles. So we're talking about a long damn way is, I think, how it's technically phrased. And I mean, you're not. So they go through a part of Saudi Arabia called the Empty Quarter. Which is called the Empty Quarter because the part
nothing there.
The part in Aladdin with the sand monster. It's just dunes, and there's no waypoints. There's no landmarks. There's no nothing. So you're navigating your way across just dune after dune after dune, like Star Wars Dune Sea. And so, but you're at full chat the whole time. And
just
then,
wide open.
Saudi Arabia's got like Southwest style, just like rocks and looks like King of the Hammers. And you got to, so it's just, and so it's just abuse on the machines. And then the start of the stage is generally a few hundred kilometers from where you're camped at night. So you're getting up at like 3:00 in the morning, driving
side by side for like
down
150 miles
down the highway, just until you get to the stage, then going foot to the floor, and then driving back. And it's worth noting that in order to basically keep the side-by-sides from running directly next to those monstrous Dakar trucks, they're limited in horsepower. So the Mavar is not going to have 240 horsepower. It has like 160, 170, something like that. And they're limited to like T4s, I think, are limited to just under 80 miles an hour.
Oh, man.
So on those highway sections, you're like dog-tired, just
mule.
welded to the floor, trying not to fall asleep.
Imagine having to run a 600-mile race, but first you have to get up in Knoxville and drive to Nashville.
Yeah.
Do the race and then drive back.
Yeah.
And then do that for 13 more days.
No, I couldn't do it. I mean,
I'm good.
There are stories about Can-Am factory racer Rokas Pachushka, who on his first Dakar, they were driving on a transfer stage, and he parked and got out, and his co-driver's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "You drive." And he put his co-driver in the driver's seat for the transfer stage and just fell asleep. He was like, "I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah, like it's your turn."
It's that or we walk.
Yeah,
like,
right. I don't know what to tell you. But like I said, so two pieces of follow-up to this. One, we interviewed Sara Price before, during, and after the Dakar. Well, before and during her time in the bivouac before the race, and after the race last year. We made a YouTube video about it. We investigated the deadliest side-by-side race in the Middle East. It's on our YouTube channel. You have to go watch that. If that doesn't make you pull for Sara Price, nothing will. Yeah. And the other thing is, I got to drive the Can-Am X3 version that she drove last year at Dakar. And I got to say, horsepower limited or not, this ain't your granddad's side-by-side. Like, these things are cool. Anyway, that is on our YouTube channel. It's one of the craziest things I've ever done. Please go check that out too. It'll give you a sense and appreciation of what Dakar is and why it's so cool that she's doing this. Yeah, I wish more people in the States watch Dakar more thoroughly, but
well, we'll be pulling for Sara.
Yeah,
she's awesome. We've had a couple chances to chat with her, and just an absolute force of nature behind the wheel. So stoked to see her compete. When's the race?
Starts January the 7th and runs through the 17th.
Okay, so close.
Yeah. I mean, you get there on like New Year's Day, and then it's just hammer and tongs the whole time. So. Okay.
Well, you had some experience running around in the desert. You were just out in Utah, right? Same thing.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly. No. I definitely just did I did a little Dakar prologue myself. No. So Kawasaki has put a new special edition out of their KRX 1000 this year. It's called the Blackout Edition, and it's called that because it's literally blacked out.
It's blacked out.
Yeah. The color. There are like 3 or 4 splashes of color on the whole thing. There are gold KRX logos embroidered into the seat backs.
Like that.
There are the red buttons on your seat belt. There's the orange warning sticker on the dash. And then there are these cool graphics down the side, which are like iridescent. You don't see them until light hits them, but then they kind of do the chameleon paint thing. So they look like ghost flame graphic, or not flames, but like ghost KRX graphics during the daytime. But then if you run headlights over them, they like...
that's cool.
Yeah, and so that wasn't the only thing they did. It's got an 80 amp alternator, so you can run and...
all the lights in the world.
Yeah. It's got an 80 amp alternator. It's got a roof with like this cool like moonroof panel. It's not removable, but it's like translucent. So you can look at the stars while you're ripping, which I don't recommend, but you can if you want to. And then it's got a VX45 worn winch on the front. It's got Kawasaki's accessory off-road bumpers front and rear, Fox QS3s, and then light bars all over. It's got like a 12-inch light bar right on the front bumper. It's got a 36-inch light bar on the roof, which is like 60 billion lumens or something. I don't even know what it is. And then 2 like trail lights on the back so that you can cut them on, so you don't have to just look for the glow of like 2 tail lights.
Right.
And the coolest thing is, if you're ripping in the desert behind somebody and you've got your brightest lights on and it's dusty, you're going to white out, right? Yeah. So your option is not see anything because your lights are off, or not see anything because you're whited out. Cowie thought of that, and you can actually turn all of the LEDs from bright white to green.
Oh,
And so if it gets dusty, like you cut the green lights on, and that shortens your field of vision considerably, but you can still see the trail,
nice.
and it just knocks down all the glare of the dust. Luckily, when we were there, yeah. So because of the blackout,
Where'd you guys go? You were in Utah somewhere?
yeah. So we were in Utah in Coral Pink Sand Dunes.
Oh, love that place.
Yeah, it was this cool 40-mile loop. The trailhead parking area is called Elephant Cove. So it's between Kanab and Mount Carmel Junction. You park at Elephant Cove, and there are two trails like right next to each other, just coming out of the parking lot. And if you take the left-hand one, it takes you through Coral Pink, and you go. It's like a 40-mile loop, and then you end right where you started, basically. So we started at like 4:45 p.m. So it got dark while we were riding, which was super cool. So we got to see the sun go down over these incredible Utah hills, just the multicolored rocks, and everything's red and pink, and, and the trails out there are incredible because it's basically a 2-track, but it's like a slalom course or a downhill mountain bike course. It's really smooth except for a couple spots. So we were ripping. So yeah, I mean, some of the coolest riding I've done, the KRX, the best thing about it is how it's just an easy, accessible rig to drive. It handles really well. It's super comfortable. It's very bare bones, but it's also pretty inexpensive. I mean, you're looking at mid-20s for like the nicest one you can get with 4 seats.
Which is insane, right? Like, we were talking about, how machines are evolving. The KRX is not a young machine at this point, right? It's what, 4 or 5 years old at this point, and like hasn't changed substantially. You got a 4-seat unit, you got the electronic suspension stuff, but really you're still looking at about 110-ish horsepower, which by today's standards, that's mid-pack stuff for Can-Am and Polaris. The rig's still awesome. Like it's still one of my absolute favorite machines. It rides great, and in most cases, you don't really want for more power. I mean, like, we all want for more power, but like it does the job. It absolutely does the job. Good room inside. They're tough as absolute nails. I love them. I don't know.
My takeaway was the chassis is magnificent, and that's everything from the actual shocks to just the way it is designed. I hadn't spent a lot of time in a 2-seat KRX before this drive, and I was fun. Just super flickable and stable at the same time. And the 4-door is great because it's just so stable. I mean, you can do dumb stuff with it, and like it pretty much has you.
I can remember when the KRX came out and everybody was like, "This thing is huge."
Yeah, it's like
Polaris and Can-Am were like, "Oh yeah, hold our beer." We'll show you, big rig boys.
Yeah. This thing's like as long as a Maverick R 2-door with 4 doors. But yeah, the takeaway was the trails we were on were super fun, but they're also very tight. For being like Floey's 2-track, they're tight flowy, and so if I had been in a Maverick R, you'd have been not using anywhere close to half of it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the KRX, it's like just weld the pedal down and like
have a good time.
Little 2-foot braking, and it goes just great. Did
you get a chance to play with the engine braking on that machine?
Not really. There was like one sand hill where like I cut it on, and it kept me planted going down. But
dude, that's one of the most impressive things on that machine. And I, obviously engine braking is not as exciting as like horsepower or fancy shocks or whatever. But the last time we had a 4-door KRX out here, we took it down 116 and we took it down the back, like reverse, right? Which is like the entry is insanely steep.
Yeah.
And I threw the engine braking on, and I didn't have to use the actual brake pedal. The thing I just crawled along.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Wild.
I mean, the thing's a deeply impressive machine, and it kind of does the thing that Kawasaki almost always does, which is like the details are engineered to the hilt, which is what's appealing about it.
And, keep in mind, this is the company that makes the Mule, and they kind of imbue everything they make with the same ethos as the Mule, which is it's not necessarily the fanciest one you can get. It has everything you want, and they're dead reliable. I think my takeaway for the actual machine part of the review was like, if you think you want a KRX, you should buy one. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
If you're like, Honda Talon, Kawasaki KRX,
hands down,
all day, every day of the week, and And again, this one has the big alternator. It comes with the light bars, but that big alternator gives you space to put extra stuff on it. It came with a Hyphonic stereo, so like you've already got the stereo mounted, so you can put more speakers or an audio roof or whatever you want on it. Like, just a very dialed machine. Again, Cowie hasn't changed a thing in a long time, but this is kind of proof that they don't need to. And and what they're doing with it is working. So yeah, very impressed.
Oh heck yeah, I'm jealous. It sounded like a good time.
Yeah, so. It was awesome.
All right, well, that is a wrap for this week. As always, have fun and ride safe. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to like and subscribe. You can also check us out over at utvdriver.com, where we have news, reviews, buyer's guides, galleries, 5 days a week. Finally, hit us up on social media. We want to see what you're riding, where you're riding. We're on all the usual channels, and we want to hear from you. We want to see you over there. Yeah. UTV Driver is proudly owned by Octane Lending. When it comes time for you to buy your next side-by-side ATV or motorcycle, finance your purchase with Octane Lending. We will see you next time.
Later.